Hi, it's Annie. Welcome to my channel Annie Freedo. In this video, we are starting to discuss skeletal system with lumbar vertebrae. Quick shout out, I teach 3D anatomy using the complete anatomy by Elsevier. Thank you very much for this opportunity because without them, my goals wouldn't be accomplished. So now let's jump to the video. The lumbar vertebrae is located between the last thoracic vertebra and the sacrum. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 lumbar vertebrae. Let me choose second lumbar vertebra, and let me tell you that every time we are discussing a bone, does not matter which bone it is, we want to think of them as in parts, surfaces, and landmarks. Let's start with the parts. This is an anterior view, left lateral view, posterior view, right lateral, superior view, and inferior view. As you can see, the biggest part of this vertebra is the structure. We actually call that vertebral body. And if you look from the anterior view, you are going to see that we have two horizontal processes. Because the word horizontal is similar as transverse, we are going to call these two processes transverse processes on the right side and on the left side. And the bridge that connects body to the transverse processes on both sides, that bridge we are going to call a pedicle. Posteriorly, we are having a single process that we are going to call that a spinous process, so that a bridge that connects transverse process to the spinous process, we are going to call that a lamina. So we are having two laminae and we are having two pedicles on each side. As you can see, the body, two pedicles and two laminae together, they create a whole. In anatomical terminology, we don't say a whole, we say foramen. So we are going to call this a vertebral foramen. And together they create a canal. Through this canal, spinal cord goes through. If you look from the posteriorly, we are going to observe other four structures, superiorly and inferiorly. Because they communicate with the adjacent vertebrae, we are going to call them an articular process. So we are having two superior articular processes and we are having two inferior articular processes. Articulation means communication and they communicate. Basically, that's it. Now let me choose multiple bones such as first, second, and third lumbar vertebrae. Let me isolate them and show you how these articular processes communicate. So as you can see, the second lumbar vertebra has superior articular processes, which communicates with inferior articular processes of the first lumbar vertebra. And also, the second lumbar vertebra has two inferior processes that communicate with superior articular processes of the third lumbar vertebra. And this is how the vertebral column fixes itself so they do not move. Please don't mind right now these spaces between the vertebral bodies, which is occupied by vertebral discs, which I will teach you later videos. We are done with the parts. Now let's talk about the surfaces. This is anterior view and superior view. As you can see, in terms of the surfaces, this part, which is created by pedicle and laminae, we are calling them an vertebral arch. And superiorly, this surface, we are going to call that superior intervertebral surface. And around that, we are having this bony structure. We are going to call that superior annular epiphysis. We call that annular because it looks like a cycle, an annual cycle, yearly cycles, because it looks like a circle. That's why. And if we look at from the inferiorly, we are going to see this is the vertebral arch. We are having inferior intervertebral surface, and around that, we are having inferior annular epiphysis. That's it in terms of the surfaces. Now let's talk about the landmarks. This is left lateral view. And on the pedicles, as you can see, we have two depressions, superiorly as well as inferiorly. These tiny depressions on each pedicle, we are going to call them not a depression, not a fossa, but we are going to call them a notch. So we are having a superior vertebral notch and we are having this inferior vertebral notch on both sides, obviously, on each pedicle. Now, these two structures are important because when we are having this adjacent vertebrae, these notches create a hole, foramen. And this foramen we call intervertebral foramen. And this is how nerves enter and exit from and to the spinal cord, which goes through this canal. We call that vertebral canal for the spinal cord. I want to talk about 4 more landmarks. As we know, we have these superior articular processes. And on these processes, we are going to have a surface that through the surface, they communicate with other bones. So on these superior articular processes, we are going to have surfaces through which they communicate with an adjacent bone. But these surfaces are so tiny, we don't call them surface, we call them actually a facet. In anatomical terminology, surface means larger surface area, while facet means smaller surface area. These two, we are going to have left and right superior articular facets. Here anteriorly observable that we are having right and left inferior articular facets. Now, please pay attention to the fact that superior articular facets are directed posteriorly, while inferior articular facets are directed anteriorly. This feature is quite important because when the adjacent vertebrae communicate with each other, these facets interlock so that vertebra does not move, slide, or glide and damages any structure such as nerves, blood vessels, and connective tissue. We have talked about what are the typical features regarding the lumbar vertebrae, but now I want to tell you what are the unique features that the lumbar vertebra has. It is obvious that lumbar vertebra has quite large vertebral body because it needs to support the weight that is above these vertebrae. Also, it is observable that the ratio between the vertebral body and the vertebral foramina, that's quite large because at this point, sports radius is quite small. On the lateral view, we can see that how spinal processes are quite tall because they need to prevent us from hyperextension. So here you are. These are features that lumbar vertebrae shares with other vertebrae as well as some unique features that it has because of its location. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one in which I discuss thoracic vertebrae. Bye.